Hi, my name's Janelle Shaw, and I'm part of the CA pre-sales team, and I'd like to spend just a few minutes with you. We'll take a look at an app on my phone, and we'll walk through a couple transactions, and then we'll take a look at how CA can provide insights into the end user experience and actually assist you in triaging the root cause. So let's take a look. Okay, so here we are looking at my phone. I'm going to go ahead and launch the Ticket Exchange application. My kids, my family, we love doing different types of events, and so it looks like there might be a promotion. So I'm going to click on this picture. That's not really doing anything. That's kind of misleading. Well, that's fine. I'll just go into browse the event. So let's go ahead and click on concerts. There's a list of the concerts, and we'll go to maybe John Elton. And you see that spinny dial. It's taking a little bit of time. That's usually a call to a back-end application. It might be running in the cloud or in the data center somewhere, and that's something that we could investigate as far as user experience. Why did that call take so long? So here's a list of available tickets. I'll go ahead and just pick one, and it looks like it's in stock. I'm going to increase the number of tickets so all four of us can go. I wonder if that green check mark, no, that doesn't really do anything. So I don't know if they're all in stock. I guess that means I could take four. I'll go ahead and click confirm and log in here. App crashed. I'll launch it again. Most of us launch the app again, but that was a pretty lousy user experience. I walked through, I added something to the cart, and now the app crashed. So it did not save the state, as you can see. It just brought me back to the home page. So it's a pretty lousy user experience. We saw design issues, we saw performance delays, as well as a crash. So let's take a look. So let's take a look at how CA can help. Go ahead and start with the user experience and then drill into performance, into the infrastructure. And so we're looking at a number of different applications, and notice at the top of the list are the worst performers, the ones that crash, and in this case, Ticket Exchange. It also has a lot of summary information here about all the applications, but I'll go ahead and apply a filter to Ticket Exchange because that's the one we care about, and you could further filter by platform or version and other attributes. So a little over 300 sessions in the last 24 hours. And you can see it's being used across the globe. This is actually me here in Pennsylvania area. And if I drilled in, zoomed in on the map, you'd see it's pretty granular. So the geo coordinates are pretty specific. You would know it was my house on the end of the block. You see again, it's highlighting the problems, in this case crashes, that are occurring within the Ticket Exchange application. So we know there's multiple crashes that have occurred. Now you notice it's hyperlinks, different places that I'm hovering over the screen. So I'm going to first look at the user session. I want to understand for an individual user. So this shows all of them. We could see just the ones that are crashed or ones that were flagged. You can even filter for just the ones that have screenshots, or you can search for a particular user ID or some other attribute about that session. So imagine a user calls in and I'm searching for user 10, which is how I navigated the application. We could easily search to find their session. So here's my session. You know that it crashed and it had some slow response times. So when I click in to bring up my session, as I mentioned, I'm here in Pennsylvania, so geolocation is an optional attribute to track. You can see the length of the session, the application details, like what version of the app and what version of the SDK for the monitoring, details about my platform and my connection, and even feedback. Now, we're programmatically attached this to the session, but you could have it prompt the user to type in feedback about what they were doing when the application crashed. We're also capturing user ID, which is an example of a custom attribute or custom metric. You could capture really any details. Maybe you want to capture how many items were in the shopping cart or the shopping cart value, or whether I am I have a loyalty card for this particular service. So a lot of different things you might choose to track. Now down below here, you're seeing all of the events within that session. So if I expand this, you can see the screenshots for the session and all the different events and HTTP requests and resource utilization on the device. You can even watch it as a video. So if I bring up the session replay for mobile apps, you can see where is the user clicking. And notice that little green dot is showing that I kept trying to click on that image, thinking maybe it was a promotional link, and obviously it didn't do anything in the application. And down below, it's showing all of the events that are occurring for each of the actions on the device. So again, I'm a user, and I can now have that feedback as a tester or as a developer to understand how to recreate the issue, right? I don't have to call and ask, what were you doing? This might fuel our future test cases, or this could help us understand why this user experienced the crash. The red on the right here actually indicates when the crash occurred, so we can see that this session did have a crash. This happens to be the exception report, so there's different levels and different ways to drill into the crash analysis, but you have that link here to show the details about that particular incident. as well as you see the thread view here for that crash report. So something that a lot of our customers use a separate crash SDK or Crash Analytics that's integrated with your performance analysis. So if you scroll down here, remember I had some slowness that I experienced as well as the crash. So if we look at the transactions, this lets us see that I shopped for products, added to cart, and tried to log in. So it shows the duration for each of those transactions, and of course when I click to view the products is when we saw some latency, that we saw the spinny dial. So 2 seconds, 399 milliseconds is considered a slow transaction. When I click in there, you see the events now for that particular transaction. Now in this case, you see it makes a call to a backend application, right? Most mobile apps are calling into other backend applications. Doesn't matter if this is running in the cloud somewhere or it's running in your data center. If you are monitoring that backend application, we can now follow and inspect the performance of that transaction across the application tiers. So we're not stuck in just knowing that it was a slow call to that backend application. We're actually now triaging into the application itself. So you can see here, we drilled in from that shop view product transaction on my iOS device. And what you're looking at here is kind of our signature transaction trace view, which shows the time across the top. And then each row in the swim lane shows a call to a component. So you can see we called into it hit this URL and then this action servlet, and then that calls into this view product action handler. So we see a little bit of delay here. We see really a source of latency here in that first Java call, Java process. Then we also see that this makes a call into, you see this red down below. So we can follow transactions across process as you would expect. And in that case, the red is actually calling our attention because there are exceptions occurring. So on the right-hand side, we can use this view to see not only the calls and the time and the duration for each of the components, but additional details and properties like which server did it execute on, what was the URL query that was passed to that particular call. And it looks like in this case, we're calling the product line interface. So that's the URL. We are doing probably a check inventory is what we're doing on this product line interface. And if you notice, there is an error message encountered. It's actually an access fault, a connection refused. So we have two different things happening. We have some latency here. We also see that there are errors and exceptions. So a lot of times this is what you're seeing with a traditional application performance management tool, but you're losing the aspect of how does this fit into the overall user session? And so now we've married that user session with the individual transaction analysis. So if I close this, we are now able to see the application map. And right now it's organized just by default with the application name. So you see the front-end web application calling into different service layers and other back-end systems. Now APM is also unique in this case because we can toggle or pivot the view. So maybe we want to see it not just by the application name, but by the different endpoints. And now you can see the browser transactions are differentiated from the mobile transactions. And both call into the TickExchange web application. And we can look at the flow that way. So any of these vertices, you really can group these by any number of attributes. So when I select one of the groupings, on the right it shows response time, variance intensity. So it shows whether there's automatic analysis or any alerts that you've defined. It also is showing all the performance metrics and the attributes for the components within that grouping. So we can see there's actually a number of different transactions that are mobile transactions, and you see they were grouped automatically into the endpoint called mobile, that endpoint type. So you can coordinate and organize the view. You can even filter by any of those attributes as well. So maybe you want to filter by business transaction or by a host name or whatever attribute, and you can save the view accordingly. Now, where this gets really interesting is not just the fact that we're looking at the application layer, but we can also now tie the app to the infrastructure. And so we see all these different layers and services interacting, but where's this actually running? And you can see that we boil this down to just two pieces in the infrastructure. So you see the different systems at an infrastructure layer and actually health metrics for the infrastructure. So now we're looking at that platform and we're pulling in not only real-time performance metrics, again, about that system, but as well, you can also see any alerts or thresholds that are breached for that particular server. Now, if we were investigating, let's say this was actually a root cause in the system itself, and we wanted to further investigate an alarm that was breached, you could keep drilling into the infrastructure. So if you see what I did there, it's actually a pretty big deal. I've navigated from user into application and right into infrastructure. And now you're able to look at details about the underlying device. But that is huge. That's significant. We just drilled from user experience through the application layers and into the infrastructure. And that is what we consider app to infrastructure correlation. Now, if we take it a step further, let's look at the user experience and think of it in a triage perspective. Maybe I don't care about the mobile app because I'm not part of that application team, and I'm focused more on the root cause within an application server or within calls to a service or a database. Experience View lets you understand that user experience, but is focused on triaging to the root cause. So if we look here, again, it's filtered on any type of a time range. I'm going to just maybe do for the last 2 hours. And you can see these experience cards summarized just like it sounds. They're summarizing the experience of any of your transactions or your applications. So I'm going to click into the Tick Exchange one, and here's all the different URLs and business transactions for that Tick Exchange application. It already shows an anomaly over here on the right-hand side. And you can even expand to get more detail. So maybe I want to see at a summary level, what type of response times are we seeing across all of those transactions? How many less than 1 second? How many between 1 and 2 seconds? How many taking more than 2 seconds? And then you see the variance and the differential analysis, learning what's normal performance. So you see the standard deviation bands there. And on the right, you see the ratio of good to bad transactions. But the anomaly is the important thing to look at here, because it's saying even though the status is good for these transactions, there is a problem occurring in the back end that might ultimately impact user experience. And so it's filtered out the unrelated transactions, and it shows that there's been a problem occurring for quite a while. If I wanted to share this with someone else on the team or copy that to a ticket so we could look at this same window in time, we could use that share URL. We could also then drill in to investigate into the notebook. So it's filtered into the context for just this ShopView product transaction, and you can walk across the cards to see the range of response times, to see again the performance. So you can do sort of a cursory analysis here. Here's the website performance compared to the actual mobile transaction of the same. So let's drill into investigate what analysis or evidence has been collected. And so as we launch into the notebook, go ahead and just close the summary so you can see even more detail here. On the right-hand side is your anomaly, and it says there's a problem. The possible culprit is the product line, inventory product line. So when we click on that, it highlights that in the list, and any of the alerts that you might have defined, or if it's something that was automatically detected, in this case, it's an error message that was detected, and it is that connection refused. It's that access fault that we saw in the transaction trace earlier. In this case, we didn't even look at a trace. It's presented on a summary view automatically. So when I clicked on that, it is actually highlighted on the map here. It's showing that call to that particular component. So if I zoom in on the map, you can see there's the product line interface. And if I click on it again here, it shows the actual interaction here on the map. And we can change that map just like we did in other views. So maybe I want to change it to, I'll even just do a default view, so what you've already seen. So here's our highlight to that check item. And we see our root cause, which is an exception is encountered. Now down below here, we see attributes about that web service. So here's our web service that's selected on the map. You see attribute information, just like we saw earlier on the map. You see additional details if you wanted to investigate additional metrics, as well as be able to do comparison. So on the middle here, or kind of the right-hand panel of this two panel, it's showing the metrics for this time range. So we can see what is the response time, when are the errors occurring, how many responses are completed. And on the left, you can compare that to a known good time period. So maybe this is a test run and you want to compare now to the previous test, or it's a production issue and I want to compare it to a known good time period. In this case, we have a problem that's repeating, so the errors are occurring in both time frames. But imagine suddenly an exception is occurring and I want to know, was it happening yesterday? Well, I can put yesterday on the left-hand side and use that for triage. And so this is an easy way to confirm that root cause. You can even look at it from a timeline perspective. So I'm going to unselect on the map, so we don't have anything selected on the map. But here we're able to see, when did the different statuses change for the components in this problem? Were there any topology or call path changes, any attribute changes? And if you notice, it's actually highlighting that there were changes in the flow. So it's showing that there were new nodes added within this application environment. So it sees changes in the call path. It also shows that there are attribute changes. Now that's significant because there might be a new version that was deployed. And if we're tracking a version number as an attribute, we'd be able to see that, hey, this particular component, this new version was rolled out. But if you notice, assisted triage is collecting all that evidence for you. It's also, again, factoring in not just the application layer, but the infrastructure. So we can see the infrastructure component and any alerts or any status changes within the infrastructure. So you truly have assisted triage from the user experience into the application performance and into the infrastructure. So thanks for watching. To learn more, check us out on ca.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn or APM communities. Okay, so have a great day.